Just a couple of minutes. I heard that after Board Dyer, you threw in somebody from across the pond to help us.
Good to be here, Judge. Good to be in the United States, sir.
Okay, hold on. Comma, final.
Yes. My flight got canceled from Chicago last night. The weather. It really did, Judge.
Sure.
I apologize.
You need to know what the airports in Chicago are so that you can verify.
Flight 3511.
Irish okay.
Today, we will work till only 4:30 because it's as if they're being sequestered and it's going to take 6 or 7 o'clock before they're in and accommodated. Tomorrow morning, I will ask them if it is their pleasure to start around the same time, or can we work till about 6:30 because they're already in class. And so we'll know in the morning whether we have a little bit longer day than we usually do. Get ready to be seated once the jury comes in. Stand up. Go check on the jury, Pete. If they're ready, they can come in. If they're still getting ready, tell me got a couple minutes. Quick favor for those that are at the edge of the seats. I was almost going to ask you guys to move down so that people can see that there's seats. You guys got here first. If you see somebody come in and they look like they want to leave because they don't think there's any, just point to them that there are places down the line that they could sit if they want to. I'm not going to make you guys move. You guys got here first. But let them know that there's more seats available in the event they want to stay. Please be seated. We're back on the record in cause number 0D09328, State of Texas versus Villegas. We are back on our lunch break. I hope you had a pleasant lunch. I hope you had a light lunch because we're going to be checking in this afternoon. When we left off, Mr. Montoya had finished his direct examination of the witness Hector Hernandez, and Mr. Spencer was to begin his cross-examination. Mr. Spencer, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Hernandez.
Good afternoon, sir.
My name is Joe Spencer. I'm one of the lawyers that represents Daniel Villegas. I'm going to ask you some questions. If you don't understand what I'm going to say, let me know and I'm going to reword it or rephrase it. Is that fair enough?
Yes, sir.
So I understand what you told juries this morning is that you're, in 1993, were part of the crime scene unit, IDNR?
Yes, sir.
And IDNR, crime scene technicians, are an extension of the police department that really is tasked with collecting evidence. Is that fair?
Yes.
Whether it's forensic evidence, biological evidence, fingerprint evidence, just any evidence that may be found, correct?
Yes.
Even if it's a hubcap out of the scene, correct?
Yes.
And, for example, State's Exhibit number 7 that has the shell identified as a shell casings, you told, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that you did not put those placards there. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. And they're numbered, I noticed, 1, 2, and then State's Exhibit 5 has 4, 5, 6. You see that?
Yes.
And then I'm assuming that there's a 3 somewhere. Is that correct?
Yes.
And actually, State's Exhibit 4 shows that there's 6 placards. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, these placards that are numbered, that is in no way indicative of the sequence of the shots that were fired. Is that correct?
That would be correct, yes.
Right. There's no way of knowing those shell casings, which shell casing was ejected first, second, third, fourth, fifth, or sixth, correct?
Correct.
You merely marked them to identify numerically how many shell casings you found. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
And you indicated this morning to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, and Your Honor, may I approach the evidence, please?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. The state's exhibit number 12, which is the diagram, is the diagram that you made. Is that correct?
Yes.
I think what you told, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, is although you didn't mark the home that I'm pointing to it in the on state's exhibit number 12 on this diagram, the home where Armando Lasso, one of the victims, was laying at, is approximately where I'm pointing on the laser. Is that correct? And I think you have to look up here. I don't think the laser comes out on your screen.
I don't know, sir.
You don't know?
No, sir.
You never went anywhere near that portion of the house?
Correct, yes.
You never went to examine to see if there was any forensic evidence or any other evidence that has any evidentiary value on that part of the home?
Correct, sir.
Did you know that there was a victim that was laying in front of that home?
No, sir.
How long were you at the crime scene?
I would say approximately maybe 3-4 hours,
Okay. What time did you arrive?
about 1:30 in the morning.
By the time you arrived, had the bodies already been removed?
One body was still there.
And that would have been Mr. England where you drew the diagram, is that correct?
Yes.
Were you aware that there was another person that was taken to the hospital?
I was aware, yes.
Okay. You were aware there was another person that was taken to the hospital. Were you told or did you become familiar where that person was before he was taken to the hospital?
No, sir.
Did you care?
I cared, I just didn't get that information.
Okay. How many other crime scene technicians were assigned that day?
Just myself and Detective Acosta.
But Detective Acosta, he's not part of the IDNR, is he?
Yes, sir.
Is he the person in charge of IDNR?
No, sir.
Okay. Was he just another crime scene technician?
Yes, sir. Back in that time, the IDNR or crime scene unit was manned by detectives at that time. They were trying to transition detectives out and just use patrolmen. Detective Acosta, he liked being in that assignment, so he stayed there too.
Did he actually do any collecting of any evidence?
I did the collecting of evidence.
My question is, did Detective Acosta do any collecting of evidence?
That I can recall, no, sir.
Did you and Detective Acosta have a conversation to determine what information you had gathered from the patrol officers that were there and the first responders about where you might be looking for evidence in this case?
Yes, sir.
And notwithstanding the information that was available there, you never went to see if you could find any evidence in front of the home where one of the victims was found, correct?
Correct.
The location of the body of Mr. England, is that in direct correlation to the block between Oakwood and Kirkwood? In Keystone, I'm sorry, that's Keystone.
Say it again, sir. I don't understand.
You didn't understand my question?
No, sir.
All right. The diagram, is it made to scale?
No, sir.
It's not made to scale, okay. Would you have put the body in a location where you didn't find it, or are you trying to, when you do a diagram, make it factually accurate to the scene as it appears when you saw it, when you took the measurements?
how I saw it and how I took the measurements.
Okay, fair enough. So it's fair to say that the body was found between these two streets. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And if we look at State's Exhibit number 1E, we're talking about Keystone and Oakwood, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we're talking about it was somewhere between this block and that block. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you familiar with this home right here at the Gorman's home where Armando Lasso was found?
No, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I think you've told us you never went anywhere in that direction. Is that correct?
Correct.
But if the diagram indicates that the shell casings appear to have been between Keystone and Oakwood, based on your drawing, correct?
Yes, sir.
Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
And the body would have been just at a slight angle, still within, not within the curtilage, but within proximity of the other home, the backyard. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. This house, the front yard points in this direction here. Is that correct?
I don't know,
You
sir.
don't know?
No, sir.
You just were oblivious to any part of that side of the street?
Correct, sir.
And you know that there was 2 people that were shot, correct?
Yes, sir.
When you're assigned a task to collect evidence, do you have the ability to use your own independent judgment and try to determine what's the best way to look for evidence, where to look for it, and how to collect it?
Once I get a briefing at the scene and they tell me these things are obvious out there, then I do it, and then we go back and look for any other things that we might have missed, or that could be pertinent.
You never went back out there again to try to look for any other things that might be pertinent, did you?
During daylight,
During the daylight you did?
yes, sir.
So did you ever go in front of the house with the Gorhams?
No, sir.
You focused in the area where Robert England's body was found and in direct correlation to where the shell casings were found.
That's correct,
So
sir.
that's your whole focus.
Yes, sir.
Did you go to the autopsy to do any photographs?
No, sir.
I think you told the ladies and gentlemen of the jury that the reason you did not, in your crime scene diagram, and I think you told the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, since you never went anywhere over by the house, you didn't look for any blood trails or look for any blood or anything like that. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
It would be important, would it not, for a crime scene technician and a detective with the ID&R to try to gather as much forensic evidence, biological evidence, and everything that they could preserve for later use. Fair?
Yes, sir.
To determine who may or may not be the perpetrator, correct?
Yes, sir.
Or even if you found yourself in trial 25 years later, after the fact, it helped you to refresh your memory on your testimony. Fair?
Yes, sir.
Because as we know, with time, memories fade, correct?
Yes, sir.
Pass the witness.
Mr. Montoya, any more questions of Mr. Hernandez?
No, Judge.
Sir, thank you very much. May this witness be finally excused, or do you guys want him subject to recall?
We would ask that he be excused.
Subject to recall, Your Honor?
Okay, I need you to leave a number with the prosecutors. Should we call you back, I need you back in 20 minutes. And if you have other places, I know you're in San Antonio now.
Yes, sir.
You're not going to San Antonio just yet, but we can go about our beautiful city and remember why you shouldn't have left. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Gerald Humphrey.
Sir, you have been sworn. Please be seated. For the record, I need your name. I need you to spell your last name.
Name's Gerald Humphrey, last name Humphhrey.
Mr. Montoya, you may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon, sir. How are you doing today?
Fine.
Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury? Tell me your name and what you do for a living.
Name's Gerald, last name Humphrey. I am retired PD. I've been
And-
retired for the last 5 years.
And Mr. Humphrey, when did you become a police officer?
1986.
And back in April of 1993, what was your role or what was your job within the police department?
At that time, I was assigned to what we called back then the IDNR unit, which would be the crime scene unit.
And how long were you in the crime scene unit? Do you recall?
I spent about 3.5 years in that unit.
And can you describe what some of your duties or responsibilities are as a member of the crime scene unit?
During the time I was there, we were basically dispatched to crime scenes, which could go anywhere from burglaries to car thefts to homicide. And once there, we would take photographs, document any evidence found there, tag in any evidence that was found there, and document it in police reports.
Would you attend autopsies?
Yes.
Okay. And what were your responsibilities at attending autopsies?
If I was dispatched to an autopsy, I would take photographs, collect any evidence that was given to me by the doctor that was performing the autopsy, and I would tag the evidence, turn it into the evidence locker, and then the film would be turned into the photo lab to be developed.
Mr. Humphreys, directing your attention specifically to April 10th, 1993, did you have an opportunity to attend the autopsies of Robert England and Armando Lazo?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And if I showed you photographs from the autopsies of both individuals, would you recognize them?
Yes.
Your Honor, may the record reflect I've shown opposing counsel it's been marked as 31 through 37.
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Humphrey, I'm showing you states 31, 32, and 33,
Yes.
and then states 34, 35, 36, and 37.
Yes, these were photographs that were taken at the autopsy.
Your Honor, at this time, state would offer 31 through 37.
No objection, Your Honor.
States Exhibits 31 through 37 are regular exhibits.
And so, Mr. Humphrey, I'm showing states 31 and states 32. What are we looking at here?
Okay, those are photographs that were taken at the autopsy, and they depict a bullet wound, or bullet wound to the head of, I believe it was England.
Okay. And can you tell from here, sir? Let me darken this a bit. What side of the head this bullet wound is on?
It would be on the left back side of the head.
Okay. And showing you states 33.
Okay.
What are we looking at here?
Another, to me, it would be a bullet wound, but I can't testify to exactly if it was an entrance or an exit, but
Okay.
it would be on the right side of the head.
Okay. And showing you now states 34. Who are we looking at here?
It's a picture of the other victim, Lazo. Picture of his upper torso and face area.
And showing you states 35.
Okay.
Let me brighten that up.
It shows some sort of wound to the back of the victim's head.
And showing you states 36.
That would be his middle torso area.
And what are we looking at here?
Some sort of injury. I can't testify exactly to what type of injury it is.
Okay. And showing you states 37.
Okay, it's a photograph of his arm and what it's got I guess a probe through it,
Okay.
showing a wound of some sort.
All right, you testified that it's a picture of his arm. Would you
know what?
state it differently in your supplement?
Wait a minute. Okay, no, I'll make a correction. It's to his lower leg. It's up to his upper thigh leg area. Now that I see, look at the top of the picture.
Okay. And Mr. Humphrey, did you collect any projectiles from the autopsy of Mr. Lazo?
I collected projectile, yes I did. It was given to me by the doctor that performed the autopsy.
Okay. And would you recognize it if I showed it to you?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, I'm showing opposing counsel states 38. May I approach?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Humphreys, I'm showing you states 38.
As with any evidence that's collected, what is normally done is, and in this particular case, the projectile was placed in a little bag and placed in a plastic container, and it's got the case number, got the victim's name on it, would have my initials, the date it was collected, and then it's turned into our evidence locker, evidence.
Your Honor, at this time, state would offer 38 attendance.
No objection.
States Exhibit 38 is admitted into evidence.
And so, Mr. Humphrey, states 38 was recovered from inside the decedent's body?
The doctor that performed the autopsy would have removed it and handed it to me, or given it to me.
Thank you, Mr. Humphrey. I pass the witness search.
Mr. Spencer?
Good afternoon, Mr. Humphrey.
Definitely.
My name is Joe Spencer. I'm one of the lawyers who represents Daniel Villegas. Just going to ask you a few questions.
Sure.
If there's something you don't know, you don't understand, let me know, and I'm going to reword it or rephrase it. Is that fair enough?
Yes.
State's Exhibit number 37 that shows the probe.
Yes, sir.
You're not suggesting to this jury that the way it is marked, you can't tell us if it was, which side is the entry wound and which side is the exit wound. Is that fair?
Yes, sir, that is. The doctor that performed the autopsy would be the one that
Right.
would do that. Yes, sir.
Was that Dr. Contin?
No, at that time, I believe it was Naha or Naha?
Okay.
Okay. All right.
So, as you said, the autopsy report would indicate if this is the entrance wound or if this is the entrance wound here. Is that correct?
Whatever the doctor performed, the autopsy would be able to better clarify that.
Okay. You did not, did you go out to the crime scene?
No, I did not.
Okay. You strictly went over to the medical examiner's office?
Yes.
Your sole job was to record, collect evidence, photograph, in addition to whatever other photographs the medical examiner was doing. Is that correct?
Yes.
I noticed in your report that you indicated that you had actually taken photographs maybe 20 or so that were taken, that did not come out in this case due to a malfunction in the camera and a malfunction in the flash. Is that correct?
Some of the photographs came out bad or did not come out at all. I was notified of that, and once I was notified, the camera went into a photo lab to be checked out, and it was found that it malfunctioned.
Right. So the photographs that you took, that you were assigned to take, the camera malfunctioned and you weren't able to preserve that evidence that you photographed. Fair?
There were some photographs that weren't able to be preserved,
Okay.
or weren't as good as some other ones.
Okay. You remember you doing a supplemental report?
Yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Let me show you what appears to me to be your supplemental report and ask you, is that your signature there?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and that's your identification number, is that correct?
That's my ID number.
Your ID number when you were with PD, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right. And in your report here, you make reference to the photographs taken of the autopsy, and you say the photos in this case did not come out, correct?
Yes, sir. That's what it said.
Right, that's what it says, correct?
Okay, correct.
And when you, as an officer at the academy, they teach you how it's important to document all the information that you get, correct?
Yes, sir.
And to document it accurately, correct?
Yes, sir.
So when you put in your report 25 years ago that the photographs did not come out, you're telling, ladies and gentlemen of the jury today, that some of them came out, correct?
Yes, sir.
But that wasn't what you memorialized and you put with your signature on, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did you attempt to have the camera checked to see if somehow it could be preserved, all the photographs that were lost and destroyed by the El Paso Police Department that wasn't preserved?
I just took the photographs. I couldn't tell you what was wrong with the camera or how the camera malfunctioned or if any photographs could be preserved. I wasn't in the lab at the time, so.
Well, certainly the photographs you took would be material photographs. I mean, the photographs you take because you think it's important, at least 20 of them according to your report, that you tried to memorialize, correct?
Yes, sir.
So that we know at least 20 of the photographs that are material are missing, correct? Or not available for this jury.
They weren't available, correct.
Best witness.
Mr. Montoya, any more questions of this witness?
No, Your Honor.
May this witness be finally excused, or is he subject to recall?
We're asking that he be excused.
Your Honor, subject to recall.
Mr. Humphreys, do us a favor, leave a phone number with the prosecutors, and you're free to go about your business. Should you get a call, we'd like you back within 20 minutes of receiving a call. But if you don't hear from us, have a good day.
All right, thank you.
All right, next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. This time the state calls Jesse Hernandez.
Jesse Hernandez,
Yes,
he was sworn in.
I believe so, this morning. May I approach the evidence, Judge?
Yes, you may.
Information about yourself, sir. Are you living here in El Paso?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and how old are you right now?
I'm 43 years old.
Okay, and where are you working?
I work for the city of El Paso.
And what do you do with the city of El Paso?
I work in the signs and markings department.
Okay, can you tell us what you do for that department?
Any sign you see out there in the city, that's what we do. So we stop signs to all-way plates, do not enter signs. Anything you see out there, we do it.
Okay, so your job is to put the signs
Maintain city street signs.
throughout El Paso?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, how long have you had that job?
It'll be 5 years in that department, and for the city, I'll be there, let's say 14 years.
Okay. I'm going to take your attention, Mr. Hernandez, back to 1993, specifically April of 1993. Can you do the math? Do you remember how old you were back then?
I believe I was 17.
Okay. And where were you? Were you going to school as a 17-year-old?
Yes, ma'am.
Where were you attending school?
Andrews High School.
Okay. So I want to talk to you, Mr. Hernandez, about what happened to you and your friends. And I want to start on the evening, basically, of April 9th of 1993, and then we'll go into the early morning hours of April 10th. Fair enough? Mm-hmm. Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, let's start around, I don't know, 6 or 7 o'clock p.m., what you were doing at that point on that night? Was it a Friday? Do you remember that?
Honestly, it could be Friday. I really don't remember. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Fair enough. And I will tell you, I think we've all agreed, I think it was Mr. Spencer that said, with time, memories fade. And so if at any point you need to refresh your memory by the statement that you gave back in 1993 when you were 17 years old, you just need to let me know, and you can look at that statement.
I appreciate that.
If there is something that you think you could clear up or refresh your memory. Fair
Yes,
enough?
ma'am. Thank you.
Have you had an opportunity to look at this statement that you gave back in 1993 before today?
No.
Would you like a second to look at it?
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Okay. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
May the record reflect in showing Mr. Hernandez, or showing the defense, Mr. Hernandez statement that was taken on April 10th of 1993.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Take your time, sir, and just look at it as long as you need to.
We're not going anywhere, but if you want to stand and stretch a little bit, we'll give you time to look at it. That was a quick stretch. That's all I got today.
Do you have another book?
Mr. Gutierrez, do me a favor, could you introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury? They're very receptive. I know that they saw something. Just tell me more.
My name is Louis Gutierrez. On behalf of Daniel Villegas, I apologize about caught on a flight from Chicago. I think we arrived to here this morning early. And so he's the resident of El Paso. Just want to do my job. Good to meet you.
Are you ready, Mr. Hernandez?
Yes, sir.
Go on, Mr. Hernandez.
Thank you, Judge. So we're going to be talking about the evening of April 9th of 1993. And I'm going to ask where you were. What were you doing that evening?
That evening, we met up at my cousin's house. Truthfully, the intentions were to just play basketball, but later on they all said, this is boring, we don't want to do that. So they made a phone call to the girls that lived on Jamaica, and we decided to just meet up there.
Okay, and just so that we kind of get a better understanding, when you say we, can you tell us who you were with that night?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Myself, my brother Adrian Hernandez, my cousins Marky Ochoa, Hector Ochoa, and it would be Armando Lasso, Juan Medina, and eventually later on Robert would meet us up at the house.
Okay, so eventually the evening began with you all playing basketball.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember where that was, more or less?
That was on Goliad, but time, no.
Okay, and whose house was that?
That was at my cousin's, Hector Marks
Okay.
Ochoa.
And eventually from there you went
To the house.
to a house on
Jamaica.
Jamaica, okay. And do you remember why you went to that house or who lived at that house?
I believe my cousin Mark was seeing one of the girls that lived there.
Okay. Did you know anybody that lived there personally?
No.
I assume that you would have met them at some point while you were hanging out at that house that night?
Yes, but at that time I really didn't socialize a lot or talk. I would keep to myself. So yeah, eventually I talked to the girls, but not where I want to really get to know them. No.
Okay. Is it fair to say that the group of guys that you're with are roughly around your age?
Yes.
So we're talking 17-ish?
17 to 15, yes.
Okay, 17 to 15. So we've got approximately 5 boys, is that what you said? Am I doing my math? You, 2 cousins, and then
It
Mr.
should have
Lazo,
been-
Mr. England?
It should have been a total of 7, 8 of us. 7 to 8 of us. Yes.
Okay. What I'd like to do, if you'll look at your screen, you can either look at the screen in front of you, Mr. Hernandez, or you can look behind you. But I'm going to show you what's already into evidence as 1C. Is that correct? State's Exhibit 1C. And let me orient you for a second on this diagram. Do you recognize what's being depicted in this particular diagram, or this Google map basically that we have?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hernandez, we have a screen for you.
Oh, okay.
If you're going to direct some testimony to the big screen, there is a laser pointer that you can use for that too.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
And I probably am going to be asking you to help the jury understand your path of travel. So at some
Yes.
point we probably will. Is the laser in front of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I believe this is it.
So just to make sure that you're oriented, this is a Google map that is not from 1993. So this street right here is being called Girl Scout Way, but back in 93 or April 93, do you remember it being called Electric Street?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then again on State's Exhibit 1C, we have this street being identified as Woodrow Bean Trans Mountain. I know that now in 2018 it looks dramatically different than it did back in 93. Do you remember kind of what it was like in 93?
Yes.
I'm going to show you very quickly, and we'll go back to this one because the streets are labeled. But I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 1D, which is a photograph. I think this one's dating back 1991.
Yes. Now that I remember.
And do you remember that Trans Mountain was very different back then?
Yes, it was a lot of
that you
desert.
could basically cross if you wanted to, and I don't think you can at this point. Do you remember that?
I remember all that. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then this area, I think, is an area of school buses.
It's still there.
Okay. Do you still live in the Northeast? Are
No.
you still familiar with the Northeast?
I'm familiar, but I don't live in the Northeast.
Okay. So now we're going to go back for the record to State's Exhibit 1C, and I'm going to ask you, I'm going to zoom in so we can see these street names better. And I'm going to go ahead and show you, bring your attention to this street that's being called Jamaica Street. Do you see that, sir?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, this is the street where you all went to visit some girls.
Yes.
How many girls were at that house?
I believe there were two, and eventually later in the evening, my cousin went to the store and he met up with some other girls and brought them to the house.
Okay. And then you said initially Robert England wasn't part of that first basketball group.
No.
But that he met up with you at a house on Jamaica Street.
Yes.
Do you remember now, in 2018, where more or less that house was located on Jamaica Street?
I believe it's the 5th house on Jamaica on your right side.
Can you do me a favor and show us? Okay. All right, so you're there with your cousins, your brother, and your friends. Do you remember what time it was approximately when you left that house on Jamaica Street?
I really don't know the time. I can guesstimate. I mean, it was dark. I didn't have a watch. There was no cell phones. We stayed there pretty late because my cousins left when they initially left to the store, brought those girls to the house, and they decided to. Where they went, I have no idea.
Okay, so let me back up again just to make sure we're clear. How did you get to that house on Jamaica Street?
My cousin drove us there.
Okay, and what kind of car did your cousin
He
have?
drove a '76 Monte Carlo.
So this was your cousin's car?
Yes.
It was a 1976 Monte Carlo?
Yes.
Do you remember the color?
It was like a copper, real faded copper look.
Okay. Who was in that car when you initially drove to the house on Jamaica Street?
It was, how we fitted in that car. It was Hector, Mark, my brother, myself, and then Mondo and Juan.
Okay. And at some point you said that your cousin left in that same car, is that
Yes, ma'am.
correct? What was your understanding of where he was going or if he was coming back?
They just said, we'll be back, and that was it. I mean, they left with these girls, and I'm pretty sure they went out somewhere to either make out or just to pass time. I don't know.
So some of the girls left with them?
The girls that they picked up at 7-Eleven, yes.
Okay.
But the girls that lived at the house, they never left. They stayed there.
So you stay there with the girls at the house, is it fair to say, waiting for your cousin?
Yes.
Which was your ride, to come back?
Yes, ma'am.
Do they ever return back to the house?
No, they never returned.
All right. How long do you think that you waited there until you made a decision to find another way or figure out how to get home?
I'm going to honestly say about an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Okay. And so again, I know we didn't have cell phones back there, but can you give us an approximate time of what time you think you left that home on Jamaica Street?
I'm saying roughly close to midnight.
Okay. And can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm going to zoom back out, where is it when you don't have a ride anymore, who is with you at that point?
It's myself, Juan Medina, Robert England, and Armando Lasso.
Okay. And how long had you known these individuals?
I've known Armando and Bobby and Juan since middle school.
All right. And this is happening in, what grade are you in?
I believe I was a junior in high school.
Okay. So you had known them as far back as middle school, and now you're a junior in high school?
Yes, ma'am.
In April of '93? Okay.
Yes.
And are they roughly your age as well?
Yes.
All right. So the four of you all end up needing to figure out how to get home. Where is it that you're going to go when you decide to leave this house on Jamaica?
We initially decided to go to Armando's house, and from there, either Armando's or myself's house, to just get to the house and then borrow my mother's car or his mother's car and take everyone home.
And so the plan is to walk
Yes,
to
ma'am.
Mondo's house?
Yes, ma'am.
Where exactly on this Google map would it be? I'm assuming I'm not depicting it?
It's not
or that
gonna
this
be-
is not depicted here. Can you
No.
tell us the general direction you would need to be heading to get to Mondo's house?
You would be heading. East on Trans Mountain. Which would be Trans Mountain or Woodrow Green. You would be heading east
Okay.
all the way down to hopefully. The traffic getting to Alcan, and then from Alcan you make a left, which would you be heading north on Alcan, and it should be, I'd say, four blocks away from Trans Mountain and Alcan.
Okay. With your laser pointer, even though it's not on this area, can you tell us, with the home you're saying it's going to be east, it's going to be in this direction?
Yes, ma'am.
So leaving the home, you're going to go in this direction?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so the path that you take that night, again, I'm going to zoom in one more time and then I'm going to back out. I think you indicated that you're more or less in this area, is that correct?
Yes,
Where the
ma'am.
party is?
Yes.
And then you get onto Trans Mountain, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you head east?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So I'm going to zoom back out, and then with your laser pointer, I'm going to ask you, as you and your three friends are walking this direction east on Trans Mountain, did something out of the ordinary occur as you all are walking together?
Well, at that time, I knew, if you look on the diagram, here was not very, very well lit. It was very dark.
And may the record reflect that you're
That's
pointing to
Fairbanks.
Fairbanks, is
Yes.
that correct?
It was very dark, and at that time, violence was really bad. So I told them that, you know what, we need to stay somewhere where there's a lot of traffic and there's visibility to other people seeing us, that we're on that street.
Okay.
So we walked heading east, but when we got to Kellogg Street, a car pulled up.
All right. And for purposes for orientation on this, do you see my pen? I'm going to zoom in. Can you show us where Kellogg Street is?
Kellogg is right here.
Okay, so we're talking, here you were, you went this way, and as you walked here, this is Kellogg Street.
Yeah, 2 blocks away.
Okay, so,
Mr. Hernandez, I know there may be some situations where you do need to get up.
Okay.
Understand that you're away from the microphone.
I'm sorry.
So speak a little bit louder so they can hear you.
I'm sorry, sir. Okay, sir.
so we've got you here a little bit away from this home here, walking this way. What happens when you get to this intersection, basically, of Trans Mountain and Kellogg Street?
When we get to Kellogg, a car approaches us, and first instincts was, hey, my cousins picked us up. But Mondo and Bobby, they saw the car first because they were in front of me. And when this car pulls up, they start yelling at the car. And then I look at the car and I say, that's not my cousin's car.
And so at first, you think it is your cousin?
Yes.
All
I mean,
right.
why else would anybody pull over and just stop right there on a busy street on Trans Mountain?
So at first you think it's your cousin?
Yes.
And you guys approach the car as if it is your cousin?
Yes.
Which direction was the car coming or traveling?
It was heading west.
Okay. So the car is going, again, this isn't a true fair depiction because this is later, but on our older map, the car's going this direction without this barrier here. Is that correct?
Yes, it's heading
going
west.
west.
Yes.
And then tell me what happens when it passes you or once you see it. You approach it first thinking it's your cousin.
Yes.
And what happens when you approach this car thinking it's your cousin? Are you all saying anything to your cousin?
Well, Mondo and Bobby were pretty irate because for the fact that we had to walk, and they left us there for quite a considerable time. So they were angry and they were yelling at the cars like, "What the hell are you doing? What took you forever?" And I'm grabbing Mondo by the shoulder and I'm telling him, "That's not my cousin's car." And he says, "The hell it ain't. That is your cousin." I said, "That's not the car. Look at the car. It's not their car." So when he realized that wasn't my cousin's car, he said, "Oh man, that isn't." The car decides to leave, but it never leaves the block of Kellogg. It just pulls further in and it turns into the street,
Turns into what street?
into Kellogg.
Okay. So the confrontation happens here, and it turns, or I guess makes a right onto Kellogg Street? Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay. Does anyone from inside of that car make any statements back?
Nothing.
No words are
But
exchanged?
they never. Those windows were so tinted; they were dark. You couldn't see who was driving or who was in the vehicle.
And can you describe that car as best as you can? And if you need to refer to your statement.
No, I remember what the car looked like, and I'm gonna be honest with you. The reason I noticed that car so clearly was my neighbor at the time had a car just like it. Same vehicle, same make. The only difference, it didn't have a white top.
Okay. So what kind, can you describe the car for us?
It was a 72 Caprice.
A 72 Caprice. Okay. Do you remember describing it differently in your statement back in 1993?
In 93, I believe I said it looked like a Monte Carlo because I mentioned that we thought it was my cousin's car.
Okay.
But I never said that it was a Monte Carlo.
Okay. It looked like a Monte Carlo, maroon and red? Was that the color of the car?
The car was a maroon, a dark maroon with a very high gloss,
Okay.
like a high clear coat.
The car had dark tinted windows,
Yes, ma'am.
and the car had a white vinyl top.
Yes.
All right. And you were able to even remember that it had white wall tires.
Yes,
Do you
ma'am.
remember that? Okay.
And chrome rims.
So back then, in 1993, you said it looked like a Monte Carlo, and what is your testimony today?
My testimony today was it's a 72 Caprice.
Today, you're sure it's a 72
No,
Caprice?
like I mentioned, I knew it was a 72 Caprice because my neighbors had the same car.
Okay. But you didn't say that back in 93?
For some reason, I don't know why, it came out like that, but I never meant to say it was a Monte Carlo because that's where things got confusing because like I mentioned, I initially thought it was my cousin's car.
Okay. And did your cousin have a 1972 Caprice?
He had a 76 Monte Carlo.
Okay. So it did look like your cousin's car, which was a Monte Carlo?
Initially, when it pulled up.
Okay. You cannot tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury anything about who was inside of that car, is
No,
that
ma'am.
correct?
No, ma'am.
They don't say anything
Nothing.
to you, and they turn right on Kellogg Street.
Yes, ma'am.
Does anything else happen in regards to that car?
It turns into the street, it stops. And at that moment, we thought we were going to have a confrontation. We thought that they were going to get out of the car and confront us, but that never happened. So I'm not even saying a minute goes by, it decides to leave. But it doesn't leave more than a couple of feet, and then it stops, puts its reverse, and it backs up. And then I guess they decided, you know what, let's leave, and it took off.
Okay. So there was no confrontation
No.
at that point?
No, ma'am.
Were you concerned that there was going to be?
Yes.
Was it Bobby or who was it that picked up a...
I'm not, you know what, I believe, if I can remember, it was Juan.
Okay.
That picked up a water meter cover.
Okay. Back in 93, you don't remember it was Juan or Bobby that
No.
picked up a...
But I know they picked up one because eventually they gave it to me and I put it down.
Okay, a water meter.
A water meter cover.
Is that what you're saying it is?
Yes, it's
Okay.
where you turn off your water in your house. It's a solid piece of plate. That's
Okay.
what they gave me.
And so one of your friends picks that up because they are concerned there's going to be a
Yes.
confrontation.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. But there isn't at that particular
No.
intersection.
No.
Is it fair to say then, Mr. Hernandez, that you don't know who's in that car or who that car belongs to?
No.
All right. At some point, does this car end up leaving?
It leaves after
And-
it does the backup. When it backs up, and then it takes off.
And which direction, how does it take off?
It heads north.
Okay. On Kellogg Street?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So then you all continue walking?
Yes, ma'am.
And you've picked up something because you're a little bit concerned about a possible confrontation?
Yes.
All right. Then if you could do me a favor, sir, I'm going to make our Google map, I'm going to extend it out a little bit. If you could show us with your laser pointer, if you'll then explain to us what happens next, the path that you continue to take.
We continue on the path heading east on Trans Mountain in Woodruby.
Okay. And then where do you go next?
We just continue on the path until we get to Electric, which is Girl Scout now. At the time, it wasn't blocked off like today. Today it's gated, but you can just walk across, and there's what you see. It's like a water runoff, like a canal where water gathers, because it would flood on Fairbanks and Girl Scout Way. So all that water would run and go into that grassy field. So we crossed into Girl Scout, which was Electric at the time, and crossed over into if you notice, there's like I don't know if it's like a holding tank, a water tank, or whatever it is.
I'm going to stop you, Mr. Hunt. Do me a favor. I see you putting your laser on the
Yeah, I'm
screen.
sorry.
That's okay. Do me a favor and show us with
Right
your
here.
laser pointer.
We get to this point, and
Yes, sir.
we do a catty corner, and we start crossing here, and then right here, there's a fence.
Okay?
We get to this point right here.
All right. So you cross, what we're saying is Electric Way back then. And walk in this area right here.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
guess, in fairness, in between the street and a fence, is that what you're saying, like a chain fence?
The fence is right here.
Okay. And where are you headed at this point?
At that point, we stopped right here, and Mondo and Bobby the whole night when we were at that party, they were always saying, I can beat you up, or like, just play for, or like my horseplay. And they decided they wanted to wrestle right there.
Okay.
And I'm getting, irritated, and I'm like, there's no time for this. Let's get home as fast as we can. And Mondo decides to take his shirt off, and he places it on the gate. And I'm telling him, what, I'm sick and tired of this. Let's just get home. And I noticed that at a glance, a car turns in. And
Is there a lot of traffic out in that area during this time as you're walking there with your friends?
not a whole lot of traffic, no.
There's some.
There's some, but it's late. You don't get a whole lot of traffic in that
Okay.
night.
And this is around midnight, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So you notice a car,
Mm-hmm.
and if you'll do me again, if you'll use your pointer laser and tell me the direction, pointer laser and tell me the direction that the car came from.
That I cannot tell you, because at the time, this is heading west, and this was heading east, and this you could jump over. And the older Google Maps, you could jump over.
Correct.
So I cannot honestly tell you if it came heading west or if it came heading east. All I remember is the car heading north when it came in.
All right. So what happens when you do notice this car that is now going north on that electric street?
A quick glance, I didn't look at stay fixated on the car. But with the one thing that got me was, as soon as the car came in, they turned off the lights with the car still in motion.
Okay. Do you remember approximately where the car was when it turned off its lights?
Right here, right when it got into the street.
Okay.
Like as if they turn in here or here, I don't remember, but as soon as they entered the street, the lights turned right off, right away.
Okay. What do you hear coming out of that car, or do you hear anything? Somebody saying anything?
Not right away. I remember I just took a quick glance of the vehicle, and my thoughts were, oh my God, it's probably the same car that approached us, because it turned off its lights, but at the same time, it could have been anybody that just wanted to park there. So I didn't really, it kind of scared me, but it didn't, how can I say, I didn't think much of it until we started, Mondo put on his shirt. He put back on his shirt, and we started to walk, and that's when words were yelled out from the car.
And what were those words that were yelled out from the car?
I don't know if I can say them in the court, but it was a Spanish saying. They just said, "Que putos." That's what they said. That's all it was. I remember was "Que putos."
And that's clearly not friendly,
No.
right? And at that point, do you recognize that it is the same car, or you still cannot tell?
The only thing I remember from that night, because it was dark, was I saw clearly I can see the chrome rims and that white top.
Okay. What happens when the car, do you remember where the car was when somebody yelled out, "Que putos"?
The car was about right here.
Okay. And what do you all do after that?
I just stood in like, oh, what the heck is going to happen right now? And I remember Mondo and Bobby saying, what? So they said, what? And then all I remember him saying was, your mama. That's all he said, was your mama.
Who said that?
That was Bobby.
Okay. So
And
they hear the "Que putos" as well.
Yeah, and so
do they go approach the car?
when Bobby said your mama, he started to approach the car, and I'm not saying, he probably took about maybe 3-4 steps, and then shots were fired.
And so show me where you believe the car was when the shots are fired.
Right here. I'm sorry, I'm shaking. So
That's okay. May the record reflect. Show me your laser pointer again, please.
right here.
May the record reflect the witness has the laser pointed midway between Trans Mountain and Oakwood Drive.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you remember saying that it was both Bobby and Mondo that approached the car?
Yes.
Okay, so they're together. approaching the car. Where are you? Do you approach the car?
No.
Where are you?
I stood as close as I could to the fence because that's where Mondo had his shirt.
Okay. And where is Juan?
He's right beside me.
So he's with you, and it's Mondo and Bobby together.
Yes.
Is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
And they approached the car, and I'm sorry, who was it that said your mama?
Bobby.
Bobby.
Or Robert.
Okay. And at that point, you think the shots are fired at that point?
Yeah, as soon as he says your mama, he takes a couple of steps towards the vehicle, the shots were fired.
Okay. What happens next?
When I hear the shots and I see, I'm looking at Mondo and Bobby and they're walking a couple of steps. And when I'm in this angle, I see like a glow. And I can't say, or it's just but I remember a glowing light and I hear a ping, like if one hit the fence, like if you flick up, but like a hard ping.
Okay.
And I just ran as fast as I could.
Okay. Back in 1993, do you remember how many shots you thought you heard total back then?
I'm going to say 5 to 6 shots.
Okay. Do you
If I can
remember saying 3?
No, I remember.
Okay.
It was just like a ta 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 ta. So it was like an echo, from what I hear. It could have been more, could have been less, but at the same time, all I remember is the first couple of shots and running. Adrenaline kicks in. So I didn't worry about Juan, Mondo, or Bobby. It was more like the self-defense where I just needed to get the heck out of there.
Okay. And you start to run.
Yes, ma'am.
You hear the shots and start running. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
In a fight or flight type of response, just get out.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So I think it's fair to say you're not standing there listening to or counting how many shots you hear or the order of the shots or anything like that. You're
No.
running.
Yes.
Is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you tell us where it is where do you run?
I run north along this path, this whole dirt road. I run as fast as we could till we got to Fairbanks.
Okay. Before you ran and you hear the shots, do you see that these bullets have made contact with any of your friends?
No.
Okay. So you hear the shots and you turn and start running?
Yes.
Okay. What happens once I'm going to move the map. Are you running by yourself?
No, Juan was running with me.
Okay, because you guys were together and Bobby and Mondo were together.
Yes.
So Juan is running right by your side as
Yes.
you run. Where do you all run to?
We run to the corner of Fairbanks and Girl Scout Way, which was electric at the time. And this is a totally different. It doesn't look the same anymore. But like we were running here, and we run in an angle. And at the time there was I can't remember if it was a Blockbuster or Major Players, but next to it there was a dumpster, and we hit behind the dumpster.
Okay.
But while we're running and we get to the dumpster, from the corner of my eye, I see a vehicle from like on the side of me, and then it just disappears.
Okay. So you basically, if I'm understanding your testimony, you and Juan, you all are together, and you run from about here all the way to this section where you hide
Yeah.
behind a dumpster.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Do you remember if you're running along this chain link fence?
Yes, along the
Okay.
chain link fence.
So that's where you're going, and then at some point, I know this is a little bit different, but do those structures, were they the same back in 1993?
No, it's different.
They were different businesses,
yeah,
but were
because
the buildings also different?
the buildings are different now because they tore them down and they put like a Family Dollar or something there now.
Okay.
So it's different now.
Okay, so it was a different business, a different look, but this is general vicinity of where you end up and you hide behind a dumpster.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And I think you testified earlier, you have no idea what is going on with Bobby or Mondo at this point?
No.
You can tell us, I'm with Juan the whole time and Juan is running with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I think you run to a major video, does that sound right?
Back then,
Was that the name of
they
it
were
back?
called like major players or major something like that.
Okay. And were you able to, what happens when you run to that store?
We knock and I start trying to pull the door open and there was no response. I don't know if there was I don't remember if someone was in there, but I just kept shaking the door and he wouldn't open. And this whole time I'm thinking, the car must be around here. It's probably going to come back for us. It's going to come for us. And Juan is telling me, you know what, we need to go back. And I'm telling him, no, we're not going to go back. Let's go home, and I'll get with Mondo and Bobby to see if they're okay. But at that time, I wasn't thinking straight. Juan was, I would say, I guess he had gathered himself much faster than I did, because I was still in panic mode.
Okay.
I mean, being shot at, it just puts you in a different state of mind.
Okay. How long do you think it was that you and Juan were at these major video or Subway trying to
I'd say about maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes. I was just confused. I just kept telling him, let's go to my house. And I kept wanting to walk this way, but he wouldn't let me. He kept persisting that we needed to go back and check up on Mondo and Bobby.
Okay, so let's break down this. You're roughly saying it's about 15 minutes. Is that
Yes.
correct? Let's break that 15 minutes down a little bit more. How much time do you think it was that you hid behind the dumpster?
That I cannot say.
Okay.
I don't remember. It was just like, the time just flew. I mean, from that time we just stayed huddled around that dumpster.
And then at some point you try to see if you can get help
Yes.
from the doors.
Yes.
And then there's a conversation that takes place where Juan is saying we need to go back and you're
Yes.
saying I don't want to go back.
I didn't want to go back.
At some point do you make a decision to go back?
Yes.
How much time do you think has elapsed from the time you started running from there to the time that you and Juan return?
From the time we started running to the time we returned,
Yes, sir.
I'd say about maybe 20 minutes.
20 minutes or so. Okay, so talk to me about what happens when you go back. You and Juan go back together, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you ever see that car again?
No, ma'am. Not that day, no.
Okay. And when you go back then, I'm assuming, what route do you take to go back?
From here, we walk Caddy Corner and we start walking up the path of, we're going to start heading south, but not on this side anymore. We're actually on the sidewalk. There's a car wash here, and we cross and start walking along this way.
Okay. And then once you arrive, what's going on?
Well, we can see from when we cross the corner, there were already lights. There was red and blue lights.
Okay, so within, I guess, the 20 minutes that you were away, there's a response.
Yes, ma'am.
There's lights from police or fire trucks or whoever is responding.
Yes.
All right. And then once you get there, do you inform, I assume, an officer?
An officer confronts us, but he says, you can't cross here. It's a crime scene. And Juan says, hey, that's my cousin there. That's my cousin right there, brother. And then the officer says, okay, you know this person? He's like, yes. So then he brings us into, I would say, in the crime scene. And
I'm sorry, I'm going to back up. Who is it that you think you're seeing when you first approach this area? Are you recognizing at some point, obviously you're seeing lights, so you're assuming, who is it that you recognize, Mondo
I saw
or Bobby?
Mondo. I saw Mondo.
Mondo.
Yes.
Okay, and where did you see him?
He was on the stretcher. He was on the stretcher, already strapped and everything, and I could see that they had torn his clothes, and he had like he was bleeding.
And is that who Juan is referring to when he
Yes.
says that's my cousin?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you say that's my cousin.
No, I don't. He says.
He does. I'm sorry. And then what happens next?
Then the officer, like I said, the officer brings us closer, and I just see Mondo on the stretcher, and he was lifeless. I didn't see any motion or nothing in him. And I don't know how we got separated. They separated us, and they put me into a cop car
Do
on the
you-
passenger side.
Before you're separated, do you give them information that you were with Mondo when he was shot?
We were together, but when he tells her that's her cousin, and Juan says, "Where's Bobby?" He says, "Where's Bobby?" And the officer says, "There's someone else. There's someone else here." He's like, "Yes. Where's Bobby?" And that's when I don't know if he radios or what. He says, "We have another one." And at that point, they separate us, and they put me in the car, and I can see the officers. I can see the officers around right here in the field with their flashlights.
And are you able to then see your friend?
No, I never saw him.
Okay. You saw Lazo, but you did not see Bobby
No.
from the car?
No.
Okay. At some point then, do those officers then take you to give this written statement that's in front of you?
When they separated us afterwards, I was with Detective Marquez, and then he says, I just stayed in the car, and they said, "We're going to take you downtown for questioning. I need a statement from you."
Okay.
And that's when I ended up downtown.
Okay. And in fairness, that statement that is in front of you, that is containing your signature. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That's the statement that you gave back in on the early morning hours of April 10th of 1993. And if you look at it, it looks like that statement was given at 3:15 a.m. Would you agree with that?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So that's the date and the time, and that's your signature to this statement.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember where exactly this statement was given, where you were, where they took you to
They took me
type
to the
up
5 points.
statement?
They took me to 5 points.
Okay.
On Rayner in Montana.
And do you remember who took you to 5 points?
He was Detective Marquez.
It was Detective Marcus,
Yes.
who took you from that scene to the 5 Point
Yes.
station. And do you remember where it was that how it was that the statement is taken? And what I mean is, generally, so this is a typewritten statement. You would agree with that,
Yes.
right? And so at some point, you've got to tell someone, and somebody's typing it. Do you sit at a typewriter and type it yourself?
No.
Or is somebody else typing it?
He typed it. Marquez
Do
typed
you
it.
remember within that 5 Point station where you were when that statement was being taken?
I was at his desk.
At his desk?
Yes.
And do you remember more or less the layout of where his desk would be within that
I mean,
office?
there were cubicles.
So
There were cubicles, so they were separated from other officers.
all right. So you remember them being cubicles?
Yes.
You're not in a closed room?
No.
You're not in an interrogation room?
No.
You're in a cubicle. Would we all agree that cubicles are basically, I don't even know what they would be made out of, but they're partially, how would you describe a cubicle?
Dividers.
They're dividers. They're basically, if we were to put cubicles in this room, there's no doors, they're dividers. Is that
Yes.
correct? And you remember being in a cubicle giving this statement?
Yes, ma'am.
You tell Detective Marcus what it is that you know, and he is the one typing it.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that correct? When you signed this statement, did he give you the opportunity to read through it? Do you remember?
I don't remember ever reading through it.
When you look at your statement in front of you, do you recognize your initials on that statement?
Yes.
Were you asked to go through it and initial at different points throughout the statement?
No, it was just all typed out. And I remember him typing it out, and the whole time, Bobby's beeper kept going off in my pocket.
Okay. I'm going to ask you on this, on your statement, there's some initials right above what's being written on here. It apparently was your address back then, and it's saying 5504, and then what's being typed is PENBROKE. Do you see where I am? Mm-hmm. Then you can see some handwriting where it looks like somebody puts an M in there. What was the name of the street that you were living in back
It's
then?
Pembroke.
So it was, the correct would have been PEMBROKE. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so do you see that handwritten M?
Yes.
And do you see those initials right there?
Yes.
Are those your initials?
The initials are, but the M's not mine.
The M is not yours, but the initials are yours?
Yes.
Do you remember correcting the name of your street in the statement?
I didn't correct it, he corrected it.
But you told him, hey, this is wrong.
Yeah, he says, is this correct? And then he says, your address, is it correct? And I was like, you said it's not a Penn, it's Pembroke.
And then an
And
M
he
is
put the
placed
M, and
there.
he says, and then afterwards, when everything was done, he said, initial here, and then where I corrected it.
Okay, and so those are your initials there?
Yes.
And your initials at the bottom of the statement, and then your signature back then?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And right above your signature, it's reading, I have read the above statement consisting of 2 pages, and even though it is not in my exact words, I find it to be true and correct to the best of my knowledge.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember that? All right. And I think we've all agreed, I think logic and common sense would agree, Mr. Hernandez, that your memory would be much better a few hours after this occurred back on April 10th of 1993 than it is today, what is my math? Almost 25 years later?
No.
You'll agree to that?
Yes.
Okay. And you're signing this saying that this is true and correct?
I'm sorry?
In a cubicle. You signed this saying it was true and correct?
Yes.
And you took the statement in a cubicle?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. I know this is going to be, where are the photos of the 2 things? May I have just a minute, Your Honor? Oh, here they are. May the record reflect that I'm showing defense counsel States Exhibit 38 and 39. I know this might be difficult. May I approach the witness? But we need to identify your friends for purposes of the record. I'm going to ask you if you can identify States Exhibit 38. Do you recognize who's being depicted in this photo?
Yes, ma'am, that's Robert England.
Okay, and I'm going to show you States Exhibit 39. Who's being depicted in that?
Armando Lasso.
Armando Lawson. Your Honor, at this time I would offer States Exhibit 38 and 39.
No objection, Your Honor.
States Exhibits 38 and 39 are immediate attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez.
Your Honor, if I heard correctly, I think 38 is a projectile, so I think...
What do we have,
We
238?
have 238, so still.
So we have
So I'm
238.
replacing, let me go back and just, for the record, may I have a new seat?
39, 40.
So we'll do 39 and 40. We don't have a 39?
I don't believe it.
Okay.
Just for the record, it's clear, it's 39, Robert England.
I'll go back and clean up the record. May I approach one more time?
Yes, ma'am.
So I apologize, Mr. Hernandez. I've got States Exhibit 39. Who's being depicted in that photograph?
Armando Lasso.
And States Exhibit 40?
Robert England.
Okay. And Armando went by Mondo?
Yes.
And Robert went by Bobby?
Bobby.
Okay. May I have just a minute, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. I pass the witness.
Counsel, approach. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to our afternoon break. We're going to take our afternoon break under the following instructions. You're not to discuss this case with anyone. You're not to remain within the hearing of anybody discussing this case. You're not to discuss this case among yourselves. I do need you back to your jury room by 3:15, at which time we'll continue with the trial of this case. As you go back into your jury room, do not freak out. We will take your luggage to the hotel that you're staying at. It hasn't been a burglary. We're just trying to get those things taken care of so that we can ease over this later on. We'll see you in 20 minutes.